Jai Baba, everyone. Jai Baba. I'm very surprised to be here because I really it didn't enter my head that I should come such a long distance. And always when I'm being asked to talk about Baba, the uppermost concern is, what is it that would justify anyone sitting out there that I can deliver to them that's worth going this distance for, taking up their time for? So my preoccupation is always to find something of real meaning to talk about in connection with how you adjust and arrange your life to take advantage of the only thing that creation has come for. Normally at a talk I usually start with Baba's universal message, and the reason I do that, first of all, it's very beautiful, but the main reason is it sort of sets the tone, it quiets my mind, and it quiets the minds of those who hear that universal message. I don't have one, but we have a little newsletter from our center in Hampton, Virginia, and we have a quote, we have something that's reproduced from The Face of God by MeherBaba. Can everyone hear me all right? Do not worry. Do not worry. Even though the world collapses around you, do not worry. Worry accumulates and grows in strength, becoming a habit long after the original cause has ceased to be. Not by seeking individual happiness or safety, but by again and again altering one's life in the service of others, is it possible to rise to the unsurpassed completeness of realized truth. God is not to be sought by running away from life, but by establishing unity with the one in the many. Purity, love, and service are the elements of spiritual life. The spiritual journey does not consist in gaining what a person does not have, but in dissipation of ignorance concerning himself and life, and the growth of understanding which begins with spiritual awakening. To find God is to come to one's own self. Jai Baba. And this second one was something that I would like to share with you. I wrote it on the occasion of Baba's, on the anniversary of Baba's 94th birthday. At that time I was in New York and New Jersey giving talks, so it was on Baba's birthday and I left this behind. I would like to share it with you. Your goal, I might say this is the tone of what I would like to be talking about. Your goal, with Baba's help, is to make your life itself Baba's message of love and truth to others. Mankind has changed the face of the world, but mankind has not changed within. To change, each individual soul must struggle in illusion and suffer the consequences of this struggle until he comes to know that all his suffering is outside himself. When he does this, then and only then can he attempt to look inside himself for relief from suffering. At that moment, the God-man graces the individual with a drop of his infinite love. And as the individual continues to struggle in illusion with his drop of love, his real journey turns within toward his real goal, which later he will consciously know is to make his life itself God's message of love and truth to others. So remember, it is always easy and exciting to change the world, or to change this person or that person, this idea or that idea. But remember, even so, you have changed nothing if you have not changed within. And if you have not accepted Baba as your one and only God, and your one and only way to join your God for eternity. Jai Baba. You know, those of us who have this rare fortune to be consciously aware of the most recent appearance of God in human form is all by itself, if you have that belief, an extraordinary thing. There isn't anything that you can compare it with. But how to deal with it? What do you do to adjust to it? What does it require of you? This is the point. I'm astounded at how little there is any direct interest in the meaning of life. Baba made very clear, at least to satisfy minds today, which have been filled with so many different kinds of things, facts, all emanating from illusion, that it's very, very easy for one to get lost. My feeling about Meher Baba, in the first place, I would say that I've heard of him for the first time in 1955. My conviction that he was God in human form was immediate, as soon as I saw his picture. By God, I don't know very much. I didn't know very much about God. I learned that from Baba. But I did know what was uppermost in my heart, because I was searching for something that made everything that happened in the world all right. And that search was basically within myself. And what I came to was the realization that the most extraordinary thing, worthwhile something in life, was a very fine human being. A human being who had great levels of compassion, great unselfishness, great courage, great discipline. All of these things I felt were qualities that alone were worth everything that was unpleasant in life. Those qualities justified themselves. I didn't really think that those qualities were God qualities. I didn't think in that sense at that time. But because of that, I began to feel that I had a great strong need. Baba once said to me, you needed to find a miracle. You have now found that miracle. Forget your past. But I needed to find a miracle. I was desperate for a miracle, but it was all inside me. And when I began to realize that a magnificent human being was very clearly justified living, justified whatever difficulties you went through, then I wanted to find out, well, where was I? So I began to examine every thought I had, and I really found that most of my thoughts were selfish. They always had to do with trying to gain some kind of pleasure of one kind or another. So when I realized that, I tried to the best of my ability to stop those things. And the great incentive was the great realization of how much I admired a truly great person. So that's the way I went. And I began to actually stop doing this or stop doing that, thinking this and thinking that. The result of it was I began to have some very, very extraordinary feelings. And that told me I was definitely going in the right direction. I was able to deal with the ordinary drabness and unexciting, unpleasant things of life from a different place. I had more lightness that gradually became even sometimes joy. And yet I was expecting nothing. So I really didn't think I needed anyone, or I needed to join anyone, or join anything. I just automatically assumed that it would continue like that. But yet when I heard that there was someone, I went through 2 weeks taking lectures one time, which seemed to be a mere coincidence. The man was extraordinary, he was a genius. But the upshot of it was, he only recommended 2 books. One of them was Cosmic Consciousness, which was something in the nature of an anthology of different individuals throughout history that experienced something really great inside themselves. Well, I was beginning to awaken to the fact that there was something to experience inside yourself. It had nothing to do with anything outside yourself. So consequently, this had great interest for me. The other book that he recommended was the Bhagavad Gita. I really didn't know anything about religion. I was born in a Christian religion, but I didn't have any more interest in it than most people that are born into it. Never thought of myself as a religious person. Anyway, the Bhagavad Gita was an extraordinary eye-opener for me, because that dialogue between Arjuna and Krishna seemed to be talking about values that were closest to my heart. The introduction of that book was written by a British writer by the name of Aldous Huxley. And I found out that he was on the editorial board of the Vedanta Society of Southern California, and I ordered all of the books from them about this ancient philosophy of Hindu India. So I read all of the volumes of the Upanishads and the Gospel of Ramakrishna, the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, Self-Knowledge, and a certain Swami by the name of Nikalananda, who was the foremost follower of Ramakrishna and scholar in this country, in America, at that time. And so I went through all of that in 1955. And I used to lock my law office door so no clients would come to disturb me. My wife was supporting me at that time. So I wrote to Ramakrishna, to Swami Nikalananda at the end of it, and what I said in my letter was, this is the first time, I said, I am tired of reading about the reality that I am now convinced exists. I must meet someone who experiences that reality. He wrote me back, and he said, one such as Ramakrishna comes along perhaps once in 500 years. There isn't any question that it would be the greatest rare opportunity to be able to meet one like that. However, he comes along once in 500 years. It isn't necessary for your spiritual progress, but you must come to see me when I return from Europe on such and such a date in September, or whenever it was. In any event, a friend that had grown up with my wife came to visit us, and she was a very real person, and she was thrilled about everything that I had to tell her about my own inner search. And she said she went back to New York, and she was walking on clouds for 3 weeks after that. And then, as a thank you, she sent me and my wife a book as a present. So I received the book at my office, 1955. I opened it, and there was the title of the book, God Speaks. And I believe that there was only one bookstore in New York at that particular time, because it was just published. So I saw Meher Baba's picture on the back. I may have read the inside of the flyleaf. I picked up the telephone from my office in Virginia. I called New York. She happened to be home, which was another unusual thing for her. She's a very responsible person, always goes to work. And I said, Liz, this is the one. Find out how we can meet him. Then nothing, waited and waited and waited and waited. It seemed like an eternity. But finally I called her, And she said she went to the publishers in New York, Dodd Mead Publishing Company. They said Meher Baba had been in this country and been to the United States in 1952, but they did not expect him back. And for that reason, I sent a special delivery airmail letter to Meher Baba with that address that was in the book, King's Road, Ahmednagar, and so forth. And I said, "Dear Meher Baba, I have your book, God Speaks. I want to meet you, and I do not think that's impossible." It was outwardly very impossible, but that's the way I felt. I was that compelling. And that was the beginning. I received an airmail reply from Baba, "Your connection with me is of long duration," and on and on. So that was the beginning. I met him in New York for the first time in 1956 at the Hotel Delmonico. I believed in him before I ever saw him. When I saw him, my response to seeing him was, there was the closest possible feeling. By that I simply mean, there would have been no hesitation on my part to tell him things about myself that I would never have revealed to a soul. There was absolutely nothing separating me from him. So, I went into that room in the Hotel Delmonico and saw the person that I knew, seemed to have known forever. I embraced him, and this person that I was meeting for the first time, I said in his ear, "I adore you." And that was only because that's the way I felt. My desperate difficulty was to come up with some way of saying something to so magnificent a personage, God in human form. And that was an incredible difficulty for me. So thereafter I wrote letters to him, and all of my letters, I tried to strip away my limited, egotistical, ordinary self, because I felt that was absolutely the requirement to address God. I had to say something worthwhile to God. God listens to everything, but if you're writing a letter to God, it must be something. Well, I found I couldn't find anything inside of me. So my efforts ended up with crude forms of poetry. I was simply looking for the words to praise him, because that was the only thing that I could come up with that was necessary, that should be said. Words to praise him. I found that God existed, and that was enough. And when I saw him again, and when I saw him in 58, there was more correspondence I would send back to him. And one of the comments he did make, because I used to write him on yellow legal pads, one of the comments that he made was such love letters from a lawyer, as though lawyers were not qualified or capable of doing it. Anyway. All right. Once Meher Baba put named individuals that would have to be on the advisory board of a group of people in New York called the Society of Avatar Meher Baba. It was started up by Harry Kenmore. And he put people like the Winterfeldts, you may have heard of the Winterfeldts and the Shaws and John Bass, people like that, on an advisory board. We were not members of the society. And Baba charged them only with 2 public celebrations a year. The occasion of his birthday and the anniversary of his silence. So we would usually have a program that was put on where Narina Machiavelli talked, and that was in the Barbizon Plaza in New York. And on one occasion, there was a broadcast in New York. And Kenmore called me and he said, "I want you to put something about your relationship, about what Baba means to you, on a tape recording. We're putting all the tapes together, Kitty Davey, Elizabeth Patterson, this one, that one." And I said, "How much time?" He said, 1 minute. I said, "How in the world do you sum up Baba in 1 minute?" I mean, it would take a Hafiz, it would take an extraordinary person to do that. But again, when the time came to do it, Baba has a way of working these things out. You struggle the best way you can, and it came to me. One of the things I pointed out, that the meaning of life was all embodied in this one man. And I was trying to develop a relationship with him. And that I was convinced that he was God the first time I even saw a picture of him. And I said, since that time, I have found out how really difficult it is to follow him, and how impossible it is not to follow him. So that sort of summed it up. Now, me see. I maybe get started off into the tone of this thing. These are my thoughts to myself about my struggle to focus on Baba, and that's what I think today is the most important thing. I really don't think about Baba in the past. In the first place, I didn't have the amount of contact, but my struggle, in 1962 we were in India, and something Baba said then very much impressed me. He said, "All of you have been children in my love. It is now time to go home and find me where I really exist. I exist in the heart of my lover." I always struggled to take what Baba said literally, explicitly, and to find the way to experience what he said. So, when the time came in 1965 that Baba was going to allow us all to come to India, and this time I was going to bring my whole family. Well, in the beginning you're worried about this and that, the money for 5 people and all this, and then you're worried about how you're going to tell your in-laws you're taking their precious grandchildren to India to see somebody who is God in human form, and these things. But finally we went through all of that, then the anticipation of actually going to India to see Baba, then all of that dross was being pushed aside, and the focus on what was really occurring. You were going to India to see the person that you know and are convinced is God in human form. And so there was a beginning of a build-up of anticipation. And when that anticipation came to its highest point, Baba called the trip off. When he did that, I was annihilated. The impact on me was equal to the amount of disappointment, to the anticipation that I had built up. And then the words that Baba used in 1962, that we had been children in his love, the words that he said in 1958 when we all went to the airport at Wilmington, North Carolina to see him off, "Isn't it wonderful I never leave you?" Those words, I had thought about those words. They meant a lot to me because I wanted Baba in a way that wasn't just this experience or that experience. I wanted his presence constantly. So when he called this trip off, I knew that I had to find the way to make him my constant companion, to make what was so magnificent as an ideal, an absolute rock-bound reality. But it was that great disappointment that gave me the need to struggle to find him within. So from that point on, I began to have more and more. They would come and go. But I was depending upon him for everything, inside. Because in my life, I think from growing all the way up to here, was a very difficult life. Very sensitive person, not wanting to go out to people, going into the law, very difficult for me, not wanting to be a judge. Somehow it's thrust on me by Baba. And every day I go through that courtroom door, it's like a new experience again. And I would say that all of the difficulties and all of the more responsibilities that gradually began to intensify, that Baba made me able to deal with these things. So I'm enormously grateful to that reality that he is every moment, everywhere, for each one of us. Our work today is to prepare for that quality in our moment-to-moment conscious lives, where we gradually flower into the new humanity. It sounds impossible, of course. But when you compare the difficulties involved to the fact that there isn't any other choice, then we know that we will do it. We have to try to find a way to do it because our lives are so empty. No matter what kind of success we achieve, And I'm always aware of the fact that my life could be infinitely more difficult. And I'm always grateful to the fact that Baba, for each one of us, places the most gentle experience in our path. Because from that experience, when we focus on Baba and try our best to responsibly deal with it, then we are obeying Baba. And that, as we say in Latin, that is the sine qua non, that without which Baba cannot be found. Obedience. And the obedience is very simple. Very difficult to do, very simple to say. The obedience is, first of all, keeping in the front of your mind that Baba is always totally in complete control. I was enormously impressed with Hoshang's talk yesterday because it touched my heart about the most critical, important thing that we all have to bear in mind today. Baba is everywhere. Why? He is the reality of each one of us. We must plumb the depths within ourselves to begin to unfold that magnificent mystery that Baba is. I view him as a mystery. I'm very pleased that he was entertained by having read to him mystery stories. Nero Wolfe, from one of our American writers. Many of us have read all of that. But we all know what a mystery is. It takes the ennui, the boredom out of life. And so we look for some quick, easy relief from the tedium of life. And Baba is the most magnificent mystery of all. And he's so present, he's so available. My God, what I really need to do is to find more of him myself so that I can communicate from my heart to your heart something that's very real. There's nothing real that comes out of us unless it comes from the heart. If we feel Baba, then our heart will tell our minds how to say it, how to communicate it. So making your life itself Baba's message of love and truth is not a chore, it's not a difficult thing that you should look at as being something that, like going to work, or something that you would prefer to wait until the last minute to face. It is the source of unending peace, serenity, hope, joy that expects nothing. Imagine. You try, Baba said, once in 58, he said, what did he say? He was in the barn. And at one point he held up God Speaks. And he said, how many understand this? I don't remember what the response of the group was. But I do remember Baba's statement. He said, I don't understand it myself. He pointed out that so much has been said because of the minds that we have today. We've got to know the answer to this and then the answer to that. There's no end to what the mind wants to know. No end. But when the heart is turned on, there's no end to how you can express the meaning of life. That truth that Baba says is so simple that no one can see it. Well, Baba is the means. Baba is the antidote, doctors. He is the antidote to the great disease of illusion. The enormity of illusion requires an enormous antidote, and God himself is the antidote. And he's made himself available in this time for us. It is our responsibility to find happiness every single moment of the day through the source of happiness. That's our job. To make our lives Baba's message of love and truth is not to do his work. It is to get out of this quagmire of ignorance and blackness. Joy that comes from the heart opening up. And Baba says, I have come not to teach but to awaken. Every incarnation, same thing. He comes to awaken. Only the heart solves problems. All of the man-made solutions to illusory problems, whether they're economics, politics, whatever it might be, however you might categorize them, all man-made solutions do not work. That's why it requires the God-man. And if in fact this is that age that is referred to as Kali Yuga, where the last spiritual push is at its lowest point, people are desperate for real happiness. They try to find happiness every avenue. There are an infinite number of roads that you can take. And all of those roads, as Baba says in the highest of the high, that too is progress, which makes you go through so much unnecessary business. That too is progress, because why? You go through this dead-end road, one after the other, lifetime after lifetime. And it does result in disillusionment, which is a form of wisdom, because you've abandoned those now. And finally, you turn to Baba and you begin to say, this is the means, this is the correct road. Well, Baba wants us to do that without going down all these other roads. Baba has given us His grace. I always think in my own way from the various things that Baba has said, that His family, it's not necessary for us to know where we are in terms of our development on the plains or beyond the plains or before the plains. That is not necessary. The gift has been given, and you can work marvels with that gift. The gift is the gift of conviction. That, to me, has come from Baba for each one of us. It's an extraordinary thing. We all look at ourselves and we see so much that needs improvement. And of course that's true. I think at one point, don't pin me down on it, maybe I imagined it, but Baba said, remember, all who are not perfect are weak. The gift of conviction makes possible the impossible, to experience an abiding reality in the midst of constant change or illusion. That's the gift that Baba has come, but it sits there on a shelf unless you use it. Literally, actually, we all, since we identify with the physical body and we have the difficulties connected with living in a physical, illusory existence, we need money. And the actual truth is, we all have billions in Swiss bank accounts. Much more than billions. Because we only use money to be happy. But you can't ever be happy with money. You play in the relative world. Like banging your head against a wall, so that you get to experience so much pain, and then stop and you get some pleasure. That's every bit of illusory, temporary happiness is no more than that. You want joy that is self-grounded. It's the heart. The master of the heart is God, the God-man. Baba said, free will has always meant attitude. I remember one time we had a horrendous argument at the center at Myrtle Beach about what free will was. One said, well, if He's God, everything's already preordained, and on and on and on. You know that old story, that tiresome philosophical thing. And I was arguing from the point of view, you have to make an effort, you have to make an effort. You know, bad to good, good to God, whatever. When I took the plane to go home, I pulled out of my pocket a collection of Baba statements. And what was the first one I read? You have to make a real effort. I said, Baba, where were you when I needed you? You have to make an effort. And what is the effort? The effort is simply this. Baba's already in charge of your life. All of those very disagreeable things that are happening to all of us, Baba's in charge of that. And we all know that those disagreeable things can be multiplied infinitely. They could be much worse. Without those seemingly difficult things happening to each one of us, you're not going to get Baba. Because you have to have the means to struggle, to obey Baba. And if you don't have difficulties, there's no way you can obey Baba. And how do you obey Baba? You try as best you can to face whatever happens to you from moment to moment, and bear in mind, most of the time, nothing is happening. So you have your thoughts. You have to zero in on every negative thought that you have that's unpleasant, and do the work of making an unpleasant thought into a pleasant thought. That's the work. It's simple. You don't even have to have a college degree. You don't even have to read and write. That's the work. But we'll find ways to constantly postpone it. Baba once said, the end and the means and the end have something in common. The end is love. And as you do your work in obeying me, you will begin to experience increments of love. Baba not only wants to take us directly to the goal, which he is, he wants us to enjoy the journey. There's no doubt about it. There will be no enjoyment except for that. The magnificent thing about God being real is that instead of becoming cynical and disillusioned by growing old, you become younger, more ripe, more magnificent, more beautiful. But the work must be done from moment to moment. We do ourselves an enormous disservice, to say nothing of the magnificence of God having stooped as low as he has to come into the density of the gross illusion, to make us see something that is so magnificent. The joy that comes from the heart awakening, to me, is like illusion with the thousands upon thousands of lifetimes, is that we were this, we were that, we were all these things. We were great musicians, great this, and great orators, great scientists, great nobodies, and on and on and on and on, simply to learn that that's not what we wanted. Like going to school. So when we left a sufficient amount of it, then our minds started to say, well, what is the purpose? There must be a purpose. Oh, what a crossroads that represents. The enormity of that point in our journey to reality is great, because that's when God gives you his grace. You have sufficiently left the toys of illusion, and you have begun to ask the real question, why am I here? And when that happens, he plants the seed of love in your heart. And then it's up to us to work with it, which is loving Baba, obeying Baba, accepting Baba's will. This is what you must do to come to Baba. How can you do this? Through conviction of Baba's divinity. 100% conviction is accepting Baba as God. How can you know if Baba is God? Some call it faith. Some call it intuition. Baba tells you it is infinite knowledge asleep for thousands and thousands of lifetimes, slowly waking from lifetime to lifetime. This infinite knowledge is what Baba calls loving God. It is the real soul of all. It is the real knowledge and bliss that is God. It is the only real God. So to love Baba, obey Baba, and surrender to Baba's will is the way to wake up the real knowledge of who you are, and that you and I are not we but one. Jai Baba. Jai. Sometimes it's hard to believe that with all my limitations I have such an incredible good fortune. But we must remember we have this good fortune as much as possible. The problems of life tend to keep us from remembering it. So our work, and that's all I'm concerned about, is what we do. How do we do it? Our work is to put Baba first. With each thought of self, hundreds more wait to be released into your consciousness. So try not to think of self. Try only to think of Baba. Turn those hundreds of thoughts into one thought of Baba. Let that be your only thought. Do not worry about this and that. Do only what you must do. Do only what you must do, but think only of Baba. Baba wants you to remember him and to remember he is in complete control. When you do not remember this, you must have the necessary experiences that will help you to remember. Some of these experiences may seem to be harsh, but none are intended to be harsh. All these experiences that bring your thoughts back to Baba are absolutely necessary, and all should be accepted happily. All try to avoid unpleasant experiences. But when your thoughts are focused on Baba, all experiences are for awakening consciousness. The worst tragedy is a blessing when you accept Baba's will 100%. So Baba tells you again and again, put Baba first, do your best, and leave all results to Baba. You know, the wonderful thing is that there is never a moment that we are not able to do the real Baba work. Because the real work is to change ourselves. And you can't change yourself. You can't put on an act. The mind, you know what Baba has said about the mind? It's a repository of thoughts, and all thoughts come from our addicted thousands of lifetimes in the illusion called creation. So that mind has to be made quiet. You can't make it quiet. One thought leads to many thoughts. You can't philosophize about thinking. You can't philosophize about the magnificent meaning of life, divine love. You have to experience it. There's only one way to experience it. You have to keep putting your mind back on what is. That one thought that has the only chance of awakening the heart. And that's to put your mind as often as necessary back on Baba. If you want, I know I run out of patience a great deal. I literally have thousands of cases a year. Baba has made my job easier than it's ever been before. It's not easy. It's very difficult. It drains me. I lose patience. I hold on to Baba with my teeth. I look at that person that may irritate me, and I try to remember that Baba is the reality of that person. What an enormous help that is for me. If I have any sincerity, it's only from Baba, and that sincerity communicates. I've done things that, for my nature, my personality, were not easy for me to do. I was president of the State Association of District Judges for 3 years. It was a horrendous thought. That was a horrendous thing for me to face. But Baba gave me enough honesty and sincerity so that we were able to do some really constructive things. And I have felt so grateful that I'm able to do creative work in what seems to be a field devoid of creativity. There is no field in this world that's devoid of creativity. Creativity is only possible if the heart is awake and the master of the heart has to be used. Everything else is a pretense. I've seen enough proof throughout my particular journey that makes me realize that there is only one answer, and that is the answer to use what we have already been so graciously been given, the conviction that Baba is God, to surrender to his will. And it is, of course it is true, there isn't a leaf that falls. There is nothing, no matter how minuscule it happens, that is not his will. That being the case, what do we say about those people who believe in him? We are on the royal road directly to the goal. 1958, Baba said, your karmic past is wiped clean. That's what I feel about every person in Baba's family. He puts the experiences in your path to bring you more directly with a minimum of pain. Always bear in mind a minimum of pain. Directly to Him. But if we're struggling with horrendous thoughts while we are, if we're trying to swim upstream in this very strong current, because the thoughts make us think we're going to some bad place, when in reality we're going to paradise. We're swimming upstream because of these thoughts. Baba says you can't get rid of those thoughts. So substitute those thoughts with the thought of me. You have the capacity to do that because I've given you conviction. But the work is up to you. I will not do the work for you. Baba says, I will not do the work for you. Why? Even that's a blessing. It must be something good. Everything that God does is good. To put Baba first, you must think. And that's all I'm talking about. That's the only thing I know of. To put Baba first, you must think, how can I clear my thoughts of self? How can I replace thoughts of self with thoughts of Baba? How can I stop thinking altogether? This cannot be done successfully at first. And this would be impossible except for your conviction about Baba's divinity. Now, the only secret to successfully think of Baba at all times, the only secret to successfully think of Baba at all times is to think of Baba at all times. Force thoughts of Baba to replace other thoughts. When it is necessary to have other thoughts, think. Baba is in complete control. Read, study, listen. I'm talking to myself here. Make decisions honestly and sincerely, and always remember that Baba is your only link to reality and the only way to experience that reality. One more, and that's it. There's something here. Oh, two more. Frustration sparks anger, and anger is the fuel that keeps frustration burning. There is no reason to feel frustrated. There is no reason to be angry. The only way each can feel important in Baba's love is to live the new life, not talk about one's personal experiences, even though their experiences are related to one's personal feelings about Baba. So try to understand how Baba can be so patient with each of you when you fail to remember Baba, obey Baba, and love Baba. When Baba comes before frustration and anger, you are loving Baba. When you put Baba first before any word or deed, you are loving Baba. When you try to feel Baba's presence in all, you are loving Baba. There are endless selves to talk about. There is only one Baba. So think about Him, talk about Him, and do whatever is necessary to love Him at all times. This is the last one. Life is a seesaw. And this is, I might say, by way of introduction to this is the dilemma each one of us is in. Life is a seesaw, and this is the journey of the soul. Up and down. The object is to enjoy the brief exhilaration when up. But in order to enjoy this moment, one must depend on another to cooperate and work for the same enjoyment. So the seesaw is illusion. And another is all outside self, or everyone else. Then comes the ego, and the ego wants to hurry to go up and stay up. But the ego cannot control the seesaw, nor can it control another. Yet the urge to enjoy the moment is still uppermost in the individual. The conflict begins. The conflict begins. Frustration, anger, selfishness, manipulation, hatred, fear, and so on. God is watching, and God says, even if illusion, and even if all cooperate, the moment of enjoyment is brief, and the work for that single moment is hard and must continue to enable the individual to keep experiencing that brief moment of exhilaration. And what is that moment of exhilaration? That moment is everything except God. And yet, God is there watching, waiting to catch an unsuspecting glance from the individual, and waiting for the next glance, and the next, and the next, until the individual cannot resist the direction of his glance. He thinks, did I see something? It couldn't be anything. There's only the seesaw. There is only the universe. There is only the whole world, which I can see and experience. There is nothing else. Or is there? But if there is something else, what about my seesaw? I cannot risk losing my seesaw. And so the spiritual life begins with the millions of unsuspecting glances over millions of lifetimes. Now for those who have conviction that God is standing close by, try to focus your glance more. Try to look away from illusion more. Try to get off the seesaw and try to listen to the words of God as He guides you in the direction of His infinite love. Jai Baba, to all of you, I am very happy because invariably when I come to a family of Baba people, so much that sustains me for that time on. Thank you, Jai Baba.